Macmillan Audio presents Face Off by Brenda Novak. Read for you by Thérèse Plummer. Prologue. Anchorage, Alaska. The cellar was almost ready. It had taken months to put in the lighting, the plumbing, the sheetrock, and the flooring, and to get it all soundproofed. Jasper Moore, a.k.a. Andy Smith, could have had it done in a matter of weeks had he hired a contractor. But he wasn't that foolish. No one could know about what he'd created. He'd bought the materials in small batches from 3 different stores, just to mix things up, and he'd done the work himself in the hours he was off from the prison. He tested the restraints he'd ordered from a bondage site on the web. He'd cemented the iron rings into the floor only yesterday and didn't think they were fully secure. He'd give the concrete another week to cure. Meanwhile, he'd finish ordering the rest of the torture devices that appealed to him. Shit like that was so much more accessible these days. God, he loved the internet. He stood at the foot of the stairs, giving what he'd created a final approving glance. Yep, he'd thought of everything. He'd even put a drain in the floor so he could wash blood and other bodily fluids down with a simple garden hose. Because he'd been married most of the past 20 years, he'd needed the income of a wife since he didn't care to work himself. He'd never had a playground like this before. He'd always had to find an abandoned shack, trailer, or barn where he could keep his victims, and then worry that they might be discovered. This was going to be so much better. He'd have constant access, complete privacy. The excitement and awareness, the raw lust he felt when he thought of Evelyn Talbot rose inside him, stronger and more powerful than ever. He'd put in the time, done the work. He was almost ready to make his move. Now that he had a place for her, a place no one knew existed, he'd be able to keep her indefinitely. Chapter 1. The weather was turning. Sierra Yerbowitz stood at the window of the small rustic cabin she'd rented with her brother and his 2 friends, and felt her stomach muscles tighten as she watched a sea of dark clouds roll toward her. She'd always wanted to visit Alaska, had wondered what the last frontier was like. With climate change and population growth, she knew it wouldn't remain unspoiled forever. Because it was vastly different from Louisiana, where she and her family lived, it intrigued her. So when her brother offered to take her on the hunting trip he'd been planning for ages, she'd readily agreed. She would have preferred visiting in the summer, when daylight lasted longer and bad weather wasn't much of an issue. But Leland and his friends Peter and Ted were each determined to bag a moose, and their permits specified that they could hunt only from September 15th to October 15th. They'd hoped to come in September, but a conflict in schedules left them with no other option than to take the trip after October 8th. "Where are you?" she muttered, searching for any sign of the men driving through the trees beyond the snow that covered the ground immediately surrounding her. Surely Leland and his friends had spotted the clouds and were heading back. They'd taken the Ford Expedition they'd rented in Anchorage, along with a trailer carrying 2 ATVs, down a dirt road to a river. Sierra couldn't remember the name of the river because there were rivers everywhere in Alaska, and she hadn't been paying attention when they were plotting their route. None of it pertained to her, since she wasn't interested in hunting. All she knew was that they planned to branch out from the SUV and go wherever the moose scat or tracks led them. She hoped they hadn't wandered too far from their staging area. If so, it could take a long time to get back, and by then, the storm would be upon them. She checked her watch. Noon. Her brother had said they'd return at
Sample complete. Ready to continue?